We, the member congregations of the UU Association, covenant to affirm and promote respect for the independent web of all existence of which we are a part. Good morning, Frackaholics. The Green Sanctuary Committee welcomes you here this morning. As always, we know you have a lot of choices, and we very much appreciate you choosing to be here with us this morning. Linda and I would like to thank the committee members and others in the congregation who provided their ideas and concerns to help assemble this morning's service. We'd especially like to mention Gene Walker, who took the time to provide us with his balanced and well-reasoned thoughts on energy resources. Well, let's begin by saying that up front that shale gas production, commonly referred to as fracking, is a very complex topic. That is to say, it's given me a serious complex trying to write about it. It's very controversial, as you know. The gas industry tells us it's the cleanest, safest energy source currently available, the fossil fuel bridge to the future. Some of our friends and neighbors here in the Barnett Shale, however, assert that fracking has ruined their lives. So our task today is to provide some of the good, the bad, and the ugly for you to consider. You remember the good, the bad, and the ugly? That spaghetti western that Clint Eastwood starred in before he started talking to chairs. We hope to provide suggestions about things we as individuals in this congregation might do to mitigate the bad and the ugly aspects of fracking. Fire brought man warmth, comfort, and cooked food, and painful burns and destruction of his dwellings. Nuclear energy brought mass death and suffering, but also enormous power and medical benefits when used peacefully. Point being, of course, that every new energy source has costs as well as benefits. I wake up some mornings, hear that big gas furnace humming, feel the warm air blowing into our bedroom, and I feel a mixture of thankfulness and guilt for my good fortune. What would our house be like without that natural gas keeping us warm? Well, it'd be pretty doggone cold and windy, I'm telling you. But you know, natural gas production is really an up-close and personal topic for each of us here this morning. There are close to 2,000 natural gas wells here in our city. And driving through the counties immediately around us, you'll count 10,000 of them up there. Most of us here this morning live within a half a mile of at least one well. And for some of us, the wells with their derricks, their condensation and flowback tanks, and their diesel compressors lie practically in our backyards. A half a mile, by the way, is the recommended evacuation radius in case of a wellhead emergency. Each gas well is serviced by a gas collection pipeline filled with high-pressure, unodorized gas. In other words, if there's a leak, you won't be able to smell it. Then there are the larger collection pipelines that take the unodorized gas, again under high pressure, to a compressor station. These pipelines run virtually anywhere the pipeline companies decide to put them, because the companies have been granted the right of eminent domain as a common carrier in Texas. Mary Kelleher became politically active and wound up with a seat on the board of the Tarrant Regional Water District due to contending with a 30-inch high-pressure gas line 65 feet from her bedroom window. That line is unpermitted, runs through a forward dump on land that was not properly prepared, and through a frequent flood area. 30-inch gas line. Natural gas is supplanting coal as the country's power generating fuel of choice. The exploration, drilling, and processing of natural gas has unquestionably created hundreds of thousands of jobs and financial booms for many areas and individuals, including members of this congregation. But the securing and use of natural gas also has a very marked downside, some of which is attributable to the product itself, while even more accrues to the nature of the industry that produces it. The product, raw natural gas, consists primarily of methane, a colorless, odorless gas, with some other ingredients that are mostly processed out, although some contaminants, including some which may pose health hazards to humans, do remain. The argument is that it burns cleaner than coal and gives off less pollution. While burning natural gas emits much less carbon dioxide than coal, methane, released from its production, is a far greater cause of atmospheric warming. Gas becomes worse than coal in driving global warming when its production leakage rate rises above 3.2%. And recent academic studies have identified leakage rates as high as 9%. Various scientific and environmental agencies rate methane's effect as from 20 times to 105 times as great as carbon dioxide. A report just published by the National Academy of Sciences states that the EPA is underestimating by half the amount of methane the USA is putting into the atmosphere. Of course, that methane isn't all released by drilling. Livestock, especially cattle, apparently exhibit an amazing and significant degree of flatulence. And by the way, I don't think the EPA is including the huge influx of aging baby boomers in our calculations. Sorry. Gas production also requires compression stations. Dish, Texas, north of Fort Worth, has so many 24/7 air-polluting compression stations that many residents have been forced to flee, including the former mayor, Cal Tillman. You've likely heard that some residents of an upper-class area near Bartonville, Texas, in the heart of the Barnett Shale gas plant, recently filed a lawsuit. Rex Tillerson, president of ExxonMobil Oil Company, one of the largest natural gas producers in the world, joined former House Majority Leader Dick Armey and others in a suit to block construction of a large water tower near their property. Part of the tower's purpose is to provide water for natural gas extraction through fracking. Fracking, of course, is pumping large volumes of water, sand, and chemicals under very high pressure to break open deep shale rock and free the gas that's trapped there. The suit alleges that the water tower is diminishing neighbors' property values and, quote, causing unreasonable discomfort and annoyance to persons of ordinary sensibilities, unquote, and that it would create, quote, a noise nuisance and traffic hazards, unquote, in part because it would provide water for use in hydraulic fracturing, which requires heavy trucks to haul and pump massive amounts of water. In someone else's backyard, of course, Mr. Tillerson is all for whatever it takes to facilitate fracking. Those someone else's backyards include the 10 acres that Tim and Christy Ruggiero purchased for their little country paradise when a ranch owner in the Barnett, not too far from Bartonville, sold a portion of his holdings as residential lots. That ranch owner retained the mineral rights to the property, which he proceeded to lease for gas development. The Ruggieros built a house, a little barn, a nice fence, bought a pony for their daughter. One day, they returned home to find a drilling company, Aruba Petroleum, had bulldozed a hole in their fence and was proceeding to set up a drilling rig right outside their kitchen window. The next 2 years were a nightmare of 24/7 noise, stadium lights, noxious odors, and heated conflicts with hostile Aruba employees. Their $300,000 property value sank to less than $75,000. I've met Tim, Christy, and their children. I've heard him speak on several occasions. He appeared in the Gasland movies. Tim's a fighter, but he had no chance. The odds were totally stacked against him. Here's an excerpt of his recent thoughts on what he and his family endured. When the drovers first show up, one loses any sense of belief one has about personal property rights. One learns the hard way that somewhere along the line, someone decided that mineral rights trump all other rights, including any one thought they had according to the U.S. Constitution. The Texas Railroad Commission, the chief regulatory agency of oil and gas in Texas, couldn't be more corrupt. Every one of them, led by Conflict of Interest Chairman Elizabeth Ames Jones, sees their job as promoting oil and gas development, not actually regulating it. When one complains to the TCEQ, that's the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, they will conduct an air sampling. If the sampling proves to be above limits, the TCEQ will say their equipment is faulty. When the sampling is below limits, then they say it's acceptable and within EPA guidelines. makes no difference that one's exposure to benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, and xylenes were zero prior to the drilling. And diesel exhaust, TCQ doesn't measure that. When the production falls, and it falls fast, losing as much as 50% or more within the first year, the drillers bring in a compressor station or two, or 15 like Chesapeake attempted in the middle of the residential neighborhood in Fort Worth. One loses any sense of tranquility and peace and sleep as the noise is loud and constant. When one has thoroughly exhausted all potential remedies, one realizes there's only two choices about the future. Stay and risk their health and that of their children, or leave and risk their credit. The decision is not easy, but there really is only one choice. One has to leave, as credit can always be repaired. Health cannot. When children have sudden unexplained nosebleeds, that's a huge flag waving that says it's time to go. Get out now. So we've left Gasland and life begins anew. We cannot get back what we've lost over the last 2 years, but we are, by the grace of God, able to start over away from Gasland. Leaving Gasland is not winning. It's merely an end to losing. For low-income people in the gas patch, though, in our area and nationwide, leaving often isn't an option. In Dish, Texas, and elsewhere, they must stay and suffer the consequences, often in silence. For them, there is truly no way out. We typically don't know their stories because they don't have the resources to fight like the Lucieros, or to move like Cal Tillman. UUs concerned about environmental justice need to be involved in assisting these folks. The idea that just because you're poor, you should have to put up with noxious gas wells, water injection wells, or compression stations across the back fence flies in the face of any semblance of morality. I mentioned the Ruggiero children's nosebleeds, one of a number of symptoms common in gasland. So what effect does this gas production have on our health? As far as we know, there are no ongoing studies of the impact of gas drilling on the 2 million plus residents of the Barnett Shale. A situation that needs to change. However, a study of nearly 125,000 births by the Colorado School of Public Health, released January 28th of this year, found that the risk of congenital heart defects in newborns with mothers living in the highest density gas production areas increased by 30%. An observer commented that this study suggests that if you want to have a healthy baby and you live near a fracking site, move. Linda often comments as we drive around Fort Worth that every apartment building here has to have its own gas well with condensation and flowback tanks, virtually all of which spew toxic chemicals visible to infrared cameras. The Endocrine Disruption Exchange, founded by award-winning researcher Dr. Theo Coleman, has for years been pointing out that many of the chemicals involved in fracking have the capacity to alter our genetic makeup, affect our sexuality, and cause unforeseen consequences for generations to come. This in addition to the cancers associated with those chemicals. Her findings have been replicated by many other researchers in the field. A Cook Children's Center report last year showed that children's asthma in the 6-county area around Fort Worth approached 25% in some age groups. We'll only touch on the immense water requirements of fracking in drought-plagued areas. 2 to 9 million gallons per frack. Each well can be fracked multiple times, and there are over 10,000 wells in the Barnett. You do the math. That water is so polluted with drilling chemicals and dangerous material from the shale that unless recycled and reused for further fracking, it is lost forever. Nor have we talked about the injection wells for disposing of that produced water with their attendant earthquakes, nor the risk of groundwater and surface water pollution. Ever wondered what would happen to the Trinity if one or more of the hundreds of wells that line it leaked? Reports last December and this month by the National Academy of Sciences and the American Association for the Advancement of Sciences climate tipping points within decades or even years, with abrupt, unpredictable, and potentially irreversible changes that could have a devastating impact on the world, societies, and ecosystems if people don't take immediate action to curb the release of greenhouse gases. So we have in natural gas, a product which may be plentiful, although some scholars argue that this is a shell game, at least temporarily cheap, and which provides this nation and the world with much needed energy, but which also threatens our health, our posterity, our climate, and our very existence as a species. But as Gene Walker noted in a memo to the committee, solar and wind have their own sets of problems. Most importantly, their inconsistency and the resultant need for some manner of storage on a large scale, which currently doesn't exist. Nuclear, as currently used, poses the risk of a disastrous failure, as at Fukushima, and immense problems with waste disposal and storage. So, what are our options? The area that promises the greatest benefit for time and money invested is conservation. Every one of us can continue to look for inefficiencies in our lives. More efficient appliances, insulation, more fuel-efficient vehicles, promoting and using public transportation, more walking and biking, recycling, and talking with your neighbors. I know that most of us already do a lot, but this is an area where few of us are doing enough, in light of the climate threat hanging over our heads. While renewables currently cannot meet all of our needs, installation of solar on our roofs and continued encouragement and investment in large-scale solar and wind projects can supply a very large percentage, thus necessitating much less need for fossil fuels. As an example, ERCOT stated that wind power last Thursday provided up to 38.4% of its power that morning. There are programs available, such as PACE and the On-Bill Repayment Program, which can help with energy efficiency in homes and businesses without upfront costs. As UUs, we can support our fellow residents of the Barnett Shale who have been and continue to be negatively affected by gas production. This means things like supporting the residents in the Azle-Reno area, trying to get the Railroad Commission to close down the water injection wells in that area that seem to be causing earthquakes. We can join and support organizations in Texas fighting to rein in the oil and gas industry, such as Aaron Harwell's group, the Environment Texas, and the Earthworks Oil and Gas Accountability Project, and numerous others. We write letters to the editor, countering the specious arguments of the industry, its minions, and apologists. We can lobby government at all levels for more air and water monitoring, maintenance of storage tanks around gas wells and stoppage of leaks from such tanks, and the modification of Railroad Commission rules that permit such leaks. A fee on water hauling trucks to pay for the deterioration of the roads. Fees on gas wells and pipelines to pay for emergency responders. Green completions on any new wells. More inspections to assure proper cement jobs around gas drilling holes and to help protect your water. Frequent inspection of existing wells, especially those near our water supplies, such as the Trinity and tributaries. A requirement for seismic studies prior to issuing water injection well permits, and significant setback requirements for such wells. Mr. Tillerson didn't want a water tower visible from his property, but one man reported at the earthquakes meeting in Azle that an injection well was 350 feet from his. The closing many water injection wells which appear to be causing earthquakes. Procedure to notify water well owners near projected gas wells to do baseline testing of their wells as a hedge against possible future contamination. And requirements to recycle and reuse produced water. The more of us that are involved at some level, the greater our chances of putting some brakes on an industry run amok, and the better the odds for assisting our neighbors who are being hammered by the gas industry.